Good evening, Cecil TV. My name is Grant Handley, your political correspondent. Joining me today, District 1 candidate for County Council, Democratic nominee Michelle Ravert. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Well, we were chatting a little bit before the show here, and I have a better feeling for who you are, but who is Michelle Ravert, and why are you running for County Council?
So I really felt like my vote was being stolen from me because in the last probably decade or so, unopposed Republicans were running, and nobody in Cecil County had a choice.
Right.
So I wanted to give people a choice.
That's nice. That's important. And we're talking about choices here, and people are looking at you as a different candidate. So in your opinion, Michelle, what are the most important issues facing Cecil County?
Fixing our broken government is number one, A1. But along those lines, too, is funding our schools. That's really important. Somebody told me a statistic, I haven't looked it up, but for every dollar that's spent on education, your property value goes up by like 100 or 1,000 or something like that. And I thought, wow, that's really impactful. You spend the money on the,
Right.
early years and you get a total return later.
So to you, that's an important investment.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. Well, we will talk about education later in this interview, but one of the most interesting parts of your platform is you've been critical of the political makeup of the county council, which, from my understanding, since its inception, has been 100% Republican for the past several election cycles now, while Republicans only represent 45% of registered voters in Cecil County. You have suggested that moving away from at-large council voting could help change that. Can you just please explain what exactly that means?
Sure. So at-large voting came to fruition during the Jim Crow era. And what that did was it diluted the black vote so that the whites could stay in power. It has since evolved a little bit and now has become a political weapon for the party that has a plurality in any particular jurisdiction. So in our case here in Cecil County, we have a plurality of Republicans, 45%. So when you take the at-large voting, it dilutes all of the Democrat votes, so that way the Republicans can remain in power. And the difference is that at-large voting is everybody in the county is voting for every single district representative and
Right.
county council, whereas I feel as though my constituents are in District 1, and I believe that District 1 voters should be voting for me. Not that I won't serve the whole county.
Right. So are you suggesting then that if we went to a district-only approach of voting, that Democrats and independents would be more competitive in these races?
Absolutely. I think we would have at least one, maybe two Democratic districts here in county.
Interesting. Kind of touching on that same note, the primary election is, as you know, closed to Democratic and Republicans only in their respective primaries. What are your thoughts of the primary being opened up to independent or unaffiliated voters?
I am all for that. I believe that those voters have their vote stolen from them because they're not even allowed to vote. I think everybody should vote, and I also believe that you should be able to vote in whatever primary you choose. So, for example, in this past election, there were a lot of Democrats that registered as Republicans to vote in the Republican primary.
Right.
If we had an open primary, you could vote in whatever primary you wanted to
Right.
without changing your voter
Right.
registration.
One of the other items on your platform, Michelle, was about the county charter. The county charter has been in effect for 12 years now, and when it comes to the budget, the county council doesn't really have much control. What powers do you believe the council should have regarding the county budget?
All of it. So it should operate very much like our budget for the state, the country. The county executive should propose a budget. The council should talk about it, adjust it, see if it makes sense,
Sure.
and then vote for or against it. The way the charter reads right now, they can only remove things from the budget and they can't add anything to it. So it really doesn't help in an instance where, and you can't move things from one to another.
Right.
So you're kind of stuck with what you have. So in the instance where we had not enough funding for schools, the county council was pretty much powerless
Right.
to do anything to help the schools.
Yeah. So talking about, some election reform, district reform, and some reform when it comes to the county council's ability with the budget, those are going to require charter amendments, correct?
Yes.
So if you were to be elected, you're a freshman on the council, you're a Democrat, probably a political minority on the council. Do you feel confident in your ability to get serious change done, by yourself, essentially?
Not at the council level, no. But there's an alternative.
Okay.
So you can get 10% of the registered voter signatures and put that referendum on the ballot.
On the ballot.
So even if I am not sitting in a county council seat, I can still affect change in the county.
That's interesting. So a different avenue instead of using the council to try to see the change you want to see.
I mean, that's the easy route, of course,
Sure.
because if the council votes to put
Sure.
this referendum on the ballot, it just goes.
Right.
There's no,
Right. Okay.
qualms about that.
Okay. Now, another interesting part of your platform is you've suggested that the handling of the Cecil County government surplus funds have been less transparent than you'd like to see. If you were a county councilwoman, what questions should you be asking the administration when it comes to the surplus fund handling?
So I think the new administration coming in, regardless of who they are,
Mm-hmm.
needs to have an audit and needs to understand where all this money went. We started this fiscal year with a $130 million surplus. We don't even know what we're left with at this point. We know she refunded some taxes, and I don't know what else. There was a couple of budget amendments or resolutions that the county passed for a couple of areas in the public works that they overspent their budget, which happens. So I know some of the money was used, but not nearly as much as was there. So that would be my suggestion, is whoever the county executive coming in is, to make sure that there's a full audit done.
So if you're elected, that'd be one of the first things you're pushing for in the council.
Absolutely.
Let's get an audit regardless of the new administration.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of the new administration, one of the biggest players in the last primary election was CCPS, right? Fund CCPS in the schools. Going back election cycle after election cycle, there's always been a gap between the money CCPS asks for and what the county executive says the county can afford. How do we arrive at what you call appropriate funding for the schools while avoiding maybe the political pushback that we saw this past primary?
Well, one suggestion is to allocate 50% of the tax revenue to the schools. If you look at it from a historical basis, that's precisely within 5% one way or the other what has been spent before this administration came in. Therefore, if you put it into the charter, that half of the tax revenue that is taken in goes to the schools, that should be sufficient.
Now, while the schools are fully funded through that model, are you worried about the other governmental departments there at the county, or how do you kind of weigh, what gets reduced funding, what doesn't, and things of that nature?
I think that our ability to solicit government funds, federal funds, is lacking. So if you don't have enough tax revenue,
Right.
there are always programs that are federally funded and state funded and both that you can use to subsidize some of those things.
So
For example, social programs, right? Our social programs have failed our citizens, and there are certainly things that we can do that don't cost any money, but even those that do, there is money out there for free. There's grants to be able to help you get to where you want to go.
You're talking about the failure of social programs. Could you just give an example of where you think CCGov has failed in the past of a social program?
So they started a task force of some sort to address drug addiction in Cecil County.
The opioid crisis.
Exactly. And really, the only thing that I have seen is they report on the number of overdose deaths in county council.
Right.
I don't see a whole lot of impact anywhere. And if you look at the numbers, and I have not looked at them recently, so I
Sure.
can't speak to what's happening exactly right now,
Sure.
but they have been trending up. So if this task force was really making an impact, you would see those numbers coming down.
Right. Interesting. So you believe, if you were a county councilwoman and you had a role in the council, you believe in a model that could fully fund the schools, and you would use the leveraging of grant funding to supplement maybe where there's some pitfalls.
And nonprofits.
And nonprofits.
So I am all about collaboration. And sustainable change begins at the local level. So once you get started, it rolls and it gets bigger. And a lot of organizations have told this story, that they help a little bit and then it just grows and gets bigger from there. So if the county government can build these coalitions with nonprofits and other agencies, state agencies, county agencies, whomever, so much could be done that really right now, with everybody in their little silos, is not happening.
If this coalition model that you're describing was successful, do you think there'd be a need to raise taxes?
No, I don't. Not only that, but I mean, with the real estate values going up, the tax revenue is going to go up in line with that.
Sure.
So I don't know. I do not believe any tax increases would be necessary.
Okay. You're talking about giving voters a choice. Obviously, you have an opponent in District 1, the Republican. What differences do you believe you have between you and your opponent?
Mr. Meffley will tell you. He will walk the line down the middle as much as he can. I will fight for what is right and what my constituents, who now are the entire county, tell me is wrong. It was very clear in the Fund CCPS movement that county council was not listening to anybody in this county. That is what's different between me and my opponent, is I will listen and I will fight for what's right. Funding our schools is what's right.
Sure. Okay, Michelle, well, as we wrap up today, what is kind of your final message to voters as we head to the polls in November?
If you would like to find out more, go check out my website. It is www.votemichelleravert.org. And whatever you do, whomever you vote for, just get out to the polls on November 5th. Thanks.
Okay, folks, Grant Handley, political correspondent. Michelle Ravert, Democratic nominee for County Council. Michelle, thank you again for coming to the show. We appreciate it. You heard her. Get out the vote, register, encourage your friends to do so, and have a great night.